If it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, welcome back to the Out of Bounds podcast. Josh Durso and Nate Sharman here talking about the 3M, the upcoming final week of the PGA Tour regular season, and of course, a little bit of Ryder Cup talk. Nate, what a weekend for Lee Hodges, who banked $1.4 million in his win at the 3M. Holy cow, that's a pile of money.
Lee Hodges went out there and he did something that no one has ever done before the 3M Open, and that's win wire to wire. Led after every single day. The 3M wasn't really ever in doubt on Sunday. I would probably say Saturday it wasn't in doubt either. He had such a big lead a lot of those times too. You know, Finau, Poston made a good run towards that end of that back nine. Unfortunately, had a tough time on the last hole. We'll get into that, but it never really had anybody that close. He comes out with a 7-stroke victory to earn his first PGA Tour victory, and most importantly for Lee Hodges, he was on the outside looking in at the FedEx Cup playoffs. I think he sat around that 73rd number. This win vaults him up 40 positions. He's now 33rd in the rankings, Josh. Lee Hodges, do you think he has any chance what do you think he's going to do in the FedEx Cup playoffs? Do you think he continues to play well and vaults into that, top 30 to get in the Tour Championship at Eastlake? Or what do you think is going on in the head of Lee Hodges here in the next few weeks?
I think it's possible. Is it likely? Maybe not, but to go out and win, I understand that this was definitely not the strongest field that he could possibly have done what he did, but he did it and he won. So, I would at least say that, I guess my question would be, what does he have to do to get there? Obviously, I don't think he's going to win again, right. But could he, finish top 10, top 15, top 20 a couple times and make his way there? Maybe if that is a path, I could see it happening. I mean,
like the St. Jude, all the FedEx Cup points are doubled in the playoffs. So as long as he finishes, and I would say probably the top 40%, he gets himself into the next week, and then anything can happen, right? Especially with the playoffs now. Last year with that top 125, if you were sitting just inside the bubble, you had to play really well to get into the next week, right? But now 70 going down to 50. You have to play well, but you don't have to come top 10 or anything like that. You just need to play decent golf and beat a lot of players in that field, and you can get yourself into the following week. So it's going to be really interesting to watch Lee Hodges over the next few weeks. Let's go back to that Poston thing I was talking about quick, Josh. Yep. On 18, he was down by 3, so he needed to really try to make a birdie with big wings, right? He needed an eagle on the hole.
Oh yeah,
he needed Lee Hodges to screw up, which he didn't. But so he hits his drive down the right side. It's actually in the penalty area, about a foot or two away from the lake. And he's now, if you don't know, number 18 at TPC Twin Cities kind of bends around to the right around a big, huge lake. So he decides to take about a 240 carry, I think it was, Josh. Ball below his feet, ball in the penalty area, and he almost knocks it on the green, right? It comes up just a little bit short, hits a rock. Absolutely bounces backwards, actually, right by the 3M logo and goes in the water. So he has to re-go there and makes an 8, drops himself all the way from solo second to T second, loses $260,000, Josh. What did you think of JT Poston's decision there? He could have just played it safe, laid it up, made a 5 and become solo second. What do you think JT's, would you agree with his decision? He came out and said he would do that decision again. He's trying to win a golf tournament. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I was listening to a ton of PGA Tour radio last night and this morning while I was in the car. And look, I'm with him. He defended it. He should have defended it. It was the right decision. None of these guys are playing to finish second and get a bigger check. They're all comfortable, right? Like they're all financially comfortable for the most part. They're out there to win. JT Poston isn't necessarily a household name, but as we saw at Oak Hill earlier this year, he's a fan favorite, and he's one of these guys that just flies under the radar and is actually a lot better than the casual golf fan probably understands.
He's really a putter.
Yeah, and because of all of that, he he doesn't have to play for $260,000. Doesn't have to worry about losing that $260,000. Yeah, I'm with it. I think it's funny because it's a very amateur golfer perspective to be like, oh man, he missed out on $260,000. These guys don't care. I don't want to say these guys don't care about $260,000, but I don't think $260,000 to them, when it's the difference between solo second and potentially winning, matters to them.
Right. I would love to see if a guy like Bo Hostler comes to my mind first. A guy on the edge of the playoffs, right, that hasn't won on the PGA Tour. JT Poston has won on the PGA Tour. If he makes a different decision. If you think about trying to get in that solo second to get more points for the FedEx Cup playoffs and try to make it farther and farther in, I would probably lean towards yes than if you hadn't won an event, because you're down by 3, you make an eagle, Lee Hodges ends up making birdie, so you don't have any chance. The only way you don't have any chance on that final hole, right? No. Lee Hodges ends up hitting that third shot. He hits it to about a couple feet, knocks it in. So it's really interesting to me because it's not like it's $80,000. We hear about these stories week in and week out on the PGA Tour where a guy misses a 7-footer on the final hole and loses $80,000, right? That's something we hear about a lot. But $260,000 is a lot of money, Josh. That's $250,000. And, that's not something you just kind of wipe off. JT Poston tweeted after, that he is wiping that off. But I'd be interested to see if he was a little bit more worried about that. But awesome to see at the end of the day, he was defending his decision. I always like that with guys or gals in this situation too, where they come out and they say, I made the right decision and I went for it. And then this is what I do. My history is defined as wins and not about how much money I made on the PGA Tour. So pretty cool to see that at the end of the day, he defended it and made that decision. Yeah.
I mean, I think in that scenario, it was like 240 something yards. It was the right decision. And I'm glad he stuck to his guns afterward. And it's kind of funny watching him. He even went to Twitter and defended himself there as well. Didn't just do it in an interview either. So that was cool.
Yeah, it was 240. It's all carry, right, Josh? The ball's under your feet in the penalty area. So it's a really challenging shot. And he almost pulled it off.
Yeah, I mean, a couple, maybe a foot or two, and it's potentially a completely different outcome. We are terrible at betting, apparently. We went over $1 billion. Do we suck? Are we terrible? Like, what happened?
Oh man, what a hard week for betting. You had some big names miss the cut, like Justin Thomas. We'll talk about here in our Ryder Cup segment. He misses the cut. Adam Hadwin missed the cut. I had Eric Van Rijn top 40, missed the cut. Sepp Straka top 20, missed the cut. So yeah, you hear what that's going on there. I had Finau as my winner pick. No one was beating Lee Hodges this week. Finau ends up coming, pretty close up there with a couple strokes back. So, 0 for 3 on my side, 0 for 5 over for your side. So, collective 0 for 8 from the Out of Bounds guys. Great job betting, guys. I'm sure everyone wants to hear our picks for next week now.
Just brutal. Absolutely brutal. The closest I came was with Hideki. I had him in top 20, finished 30th. So, that's whatever. Sometimes that happens. Let's talk about this past weekend and the Ryder Cup. Our expectations. I know you have a lot of thoughts here, so I'm going to let you kind of take this away and then I'll jump in afterward. But where do we stand now? Did this past weekend change anything in your mind for the Ryder Cup, American squad?
Yeah, we'll focus on the American side today. Automatic qualifying goes through the BMW Championship, and then captain's picks are released a little bit after that. So we still have a few weeks to determine our Ryder Cup team. But I think out of the 12 golfers, I think 11 of the golfers are decided. And I think Zach Johnson is going to have one choice to go on the last one, but we'll go through my 11 golfers here. We'll start with the 6 automatic qualifiers: Scotty Scheffler, Wyndham Clark, Brian Harman, Brooks Koepka, Xander Schauffele, and Patrick Cantlay. So those are your 6 as of right now. That 6th spot has changed a little bit. Cantlay's flown in there. Homa's flown in there. They've kind of done a little bit of flip-flopping. It's not going to matter either way. Those guys are both on the team. So I'll go through my next 5 that I think are definitely on the team. First one was Max Homa, like I mentioned. Number 8th ranked player in the US rankings, Cameron Young. Keegan Bradley, who's won numerous times on the PGA Tour this season. Jordan Spieth, Ricky Fowler round out my 11. That leaves one more spot, in my opinion, for the Ryder Cup team. And you have the likes of Justin Thomas, Colin Morikawa, Sam Burns, Denny McCarthy, Tony Finau, and Live Tour enthusiast Dustin Johnson. Josh, I know you don't necessarily agree. I'd love to hear what you have and what you think about my 11 so far for the Ryder Cup team.
I think I think to your point, it's mostly cemented. I don't think there's a ton of wiggle room here with the 11 guys that you mentioned. I would flip Finau and Young. That would be my one modification. And I know Young, you crucified me before we started here that he's ranked way too high to be on the outside looking in. I guess to me, he would be one of those guys that I would consider for that 12th spot, but he just hasn't performed well enough. Tony Finau has won. He literally won. I think Young is a compelling 12th man. And when I look at those other names that you mentioned, Sam Burns, he won earlier this year, didn't he?
Yep.
So, I mean, there's another guy who, in my opinion, wins matter. Those two would be the first up to get into that last spot or to fight for that last spot. A lot of it depends on how they play sort of over these remaining weeks. Justin Thomas, I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing me talk about Justin Thomas and how bad he is at golf. But right now he's just not that great at golf. He's one of everybody's favorite golfers, but his game, to his own admission, is not where it should be. He hasn't really done anything since the 2022 PGA. Nothing against that, but that was a long time ago, and he looks like a completely different golfer now. Statistically, he's all over the board, and kind of, I put Morikawa in the same kind of category where we've seen bits and pieces of.
Yeah, Morikawa's played better than JT this year.
But I think it's more of the same where like there isn't necessarily like one part of his game that we can point to and say like, oh, if only he was doing this better, he'd be the complete package and he'd be contending and winning. It seems like a little bit of everything. And when we're talking about picks for something like this, especially when there is only one spot left, to me, I don't think you can pick any of those guys who are kind of like have multiple exposures. If that makes sense.
What are your thoughts on Dustin Johnson? We haven't seen him play on the PGA Tour, obviously, right? Playing over on the Live Tour. He did win in Live. He's played not that well in the majors. I think he played well in the Masters. The other few, he didn't play too well. What are your thoughts on taking Dustin as that 12th man?
I mean, he played horrifically in the Open, right? Like right. He literally played abysmal.
Yeah, him and JT, they both shot 82, I think, or 81.
Yeah, I think, look, if you're taking Dustin, you're taking him based on what he brings to the table as a veteran, experienced Ryder Cup player. And I also think there probably is an element of he can get along with anybody. He can jive with anybody on a golf course. So I think there is upside to picking a guy like him. I just don't know if, given the other people that we've talked about, I don't know if I could take him. I mean, how would you rank those guys that you have in your final five? Who would you put at the top and who would you put at the bottom?
Finau and probably McCarthy at the bottom, just because McCarthy hasn't won. Right. I think I would go, Finau and taking him and then thinking about Dustin, Morikawa, JT, kind of all in a similar echelon, right? I think Dustin and JT both have that veteran experience thing that they're kind of alluding to. The only defense I would have of that is that you're bringing Ricky Fowler this year, and that's someone we don't always bring, right? We've seen a huge resurgence of Ricky Fowler this season. Got a victory in the PGA Tour, had the 54-hole lead at the US Open. So Ricky Fowler has been around before and knows what to do. So there's a little bit of veteran presence in that sense with Ricky Fowler. So that kind of takes away from needing more veteran presence, right? We look at this last Ryder Cup team; they were very young. They had, Harris English was on the team too, and Tony Finau as well. So they were a really young team, and look, they won by 1 million, right, in that last Ryder Cup. So do you need veteran experience? I don't know. I don't think maybe if you don't, right? Especially some of these guys like Scheffler and Homa are getting a little bit older. Cantlay, Schauffele, they played in these events before too, whether they be the Walker Cup as well as the Ryder Cup. So I think that veteran aspect for guys like DJ and Justin Thomas is going to kind of go away as this teams get a little bit more experienced and younger too.
Yeah. And you know what? Let's also point out the fact that a few of these guys are not as early in their career as some other relatively.
The only one that's young in his career is Cameron Young. He's the only one really in my mind. The rest of them have been around for a few years.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Harmon's literally 36 years old. Wyndham
Right.
Clark, I believe he's approaching 30 or maybe
I
just
think
a
he's
hair
28.
over
Yeah.
30. Yeah, there you go. So 28. Yeah, like Keegan Bradley is another one. He's been around forever. Not
Yep. Pat
necessarily
Fizzle.
a super, not old, not young, but definitely in the middle there. So this will be a different kind of experienced team. What do you make of the idea that we may be entering an era of Ryder Cup golf where we don't necessarily see the same names year in and year out on every team? Because it feels a lot like, by the time this comes around in 2 years, we could be talking about a completely new list of 8 to 12 guys.
Yeah, and
Or
I think that's the fun part of it, right? I mean, he's 6 to 8. Yeah, like you said, 6 to 8 guys are pretty much cemented. Like Scotty Scheffler is going to be on the team until he's done playing. There's no way Scotty Scheffler plays bad enough to do that, right? But like, you guys, some of those guys on the end there, careers can turn around pretty quickly, especially in golf, right? So I think it's really interesting to talk about these guys. It's interesting to me too that they take the rankings from last year, right? Too, and they take how you play from the year before and before the last Ryder Cup happened, and to kind of account for where you are in terms of the U.S. team rankings, which I'm kind of interested by, because it's more of a what have you done for me lately thing as we get closer and closer to the Ryder Cup. And it's kind of interesting that they do points from last season too.
Yeah, golf is a very interesting sport when it comes to that. Unlike a lot of other sports, how you're playing in the moment right now matters a great deal, and your game can spin on a week. Can do a 180 in literally a week or two.
Right. Mine can, especially, right? You go from shooting a billion to playing one of your best rounds. So that's just kind of how golf is, and that's why we love it.
All right, so let's talk about the Barstool-led production on the Korn Ferry Tour this past week. I feel like the response to it was positive. I saw a lot more clips online. I saw a lot more engagement with clips online, which is, I guess, what you'd expect from anything Barstool does. But what did you think about the actual television-esque production of this event this past week?
I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was, really good, actually. The Barstool has never really done anything live like this. And to step in and do a Korn Ferry Tour event, even this close to the playoffs with this big of implications, right, is huge too. Because one thing that, not a lot is talked about is these players aren't necessarily, in tune with the idea of media people walking around the golf course, right, and doing live interviews. I think the Korn Ferry Tour sent out a poll to all the players and how interested they'd be in it. And they kind of went about that way, which I think is a good idea. Yeah. But I think this is cool at the end of the day, because it breaks barriers, right, Josh? It's definitely not the traditional golf broadcast all week. And there was definitely some telltale signs of that, right? Where, you have some of the hosts talking over each other or saying something, that you would never hear on a TV broadcast, which at first glance is like, well, why are they saying that? Or what are they doing there? But golf is in a spot these last few years, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, where it's totally changed, right? The way people play golf and the way people think about golf is absolutely different and a lot more relaxed than it was, say, 10 years ago. So I think Barstool being able to jump into the Korn Ferry Tour and do this and, put on this production, which was unbelievable at the end of the day from a production standpoint, in my mind, not something they do on a normal basis, but was pretty cool. And I hope they do it again, because I enjoyed watching it. I saw clips from, all 4 days and was able to kind of tune in here and there, especially on Sunday too, as Trace Crow got the victory in a playoff. So it was definitely fun to watch, I thought. Josh, do you have kind of the same kind of feeling, or what were you thinking watching, Barstool.tv?
Yeah, I think you had the expected hiccups, right? Throughout, like you and I talked a little bit about kind of some chatter over each other and whatnot, like at different times that were less than ideal. But at the end of the day, they were doing something completely different. And right. I think the thing is like, when it comes to broadcasting golf, the powers that be need to be way more creative in how they leverage influencers and brands like Barstool, because that's really what's driving the popularity of golf online. It isn't I hate to say this, but it isn't as much what the pros are doing on tour that's driving golf's popularity. It's the ability for the average hack to go out with their buddies and have fun playing golf, something that clearly blew up during the pandemic, right? and seeing Bob Does Sports, Foreplay, seeing all these different brands and influencers that have grown up over the last half dozen years on the internet turn into what they are now. And it's those two things together that are driving the direction of golf. So if you're the PGA Tour, if you're LIV, if you're this new entity that's going to be created in the future, I think you just absolutely need to lean into what the new golfers want to see. And they want to see a more laid back, less buttoned up production. They just do. The only people who are, it's funny if as I'm scrolling through Twitter, watching the reaction to, I believe it was, I don't recall if it was Friday or Saturday when I looked at it, but I was reading through some of the tweets and replies to some of the clips and stuff that were online. And the feedback was very age split. You had a lot of older consumers of golf not happy with what they were saying. And then you had a lot of younger people, younger consumers of golf absolutely loving it. So it is what it is. Like, that's what you get.
Right. At the end of the day, they took something that's never been done before, especially at their company too. And they did a pretty overall awesome job with it. It was very compelling to watch. Jake Marks, Riggs, and Kirk in the booth. I thought they were good. I thought they, had some moments where they talked over each other, but that's to be expected, right? Jake Marsh is the only one in the whole company, really, that, and maybe not the whole company, but a lot of the production that's used to play-by-play broadcasting, right? So as these other guys are more so, on-air hosts than broadcasting, and that's just a whole different, Pandora's box to open up. So I really think hats off to the Barstool crew for doing a great job with that, especially the Foreplay guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of things that show themselves on television, we had a little bit of drama on the LPGA Tour side of things. Carlota Ciganda refuses to sign her card after being assessed a 2-stroke penalty at the Wyndham Championship over in France. She was penalized for breaching the pace of play policy, refuses to sign the card, which would have added 2 strokes. She then gets DQ'd, then releases a lengthy statement basically blasting the rules officials for not understanding what professional golf is. Thoughts on the situation, and then thoughts on the reply, I guess, that she gave, which to me kind of stood out because we've seen stuff like this happen in the past, but we've even talked about situations involving rules violations, but we haven't necessarily seen players come out afterwards and come out swinging at that.
Right. And we talked about how we've called for rules officials on all levels of golf, right, to be more adamant in giving these players, warnings and then penalties, right? And that's something we've called for, and they did it. They went out and they gave a warning, and they went through the proper processes to get the group penalized, and they went through it and they did it, and they assessed her, and then she knew that she was getting that DQ when she signed the scorecard, still did it anyways. So I think it's good in that sense, right, to go through those process and not be scared to give penalties to players. But then I also like it from the player standpoint because she believes that she did not break the rules. That's the end of story, is that she believes that she followed the rules after she was warned to get back in kind of the right spot, right? So I respect that she went out there and signed the wrong scorecard intentionally, right? She believes that she shouldn't have been penalized, and that's the end of that, right? So I think that's cool for a player of her stature to sign that incorrect scorecard and really make a statement to golf with, we're not doing this rule right. But it's really scary to me because this can be a slippery slope, because rules officials may be scared in the future to penalize players if this is going to be the backlash, right, Josh?
I kind of look at it the other way. I think there needs to be way more of it, and I think more high-profile players need to be getting hit with these penalties if they're going to really do something about the pace of play issue, because what we've seen now is just kind of like a scatterbrained approach to it, right? Like, we occasionally see somebody get hit with a penalty. This obviously makes waves because the player pushed back, but in truth, we need to be seeing this every week because it's happening every single week.
Right.
And I also think that the part that she brings up about enforcement is super important because it's difficult to have uniform enforcement without having some sort of, I don't want to say like there needs to be a shot clock, or there needs to be like a timer on every single group, but it needs to be, because one of the things that I had heard, and I didn't have a chance to go back and take a look at this, but by the time she was actually assessed the penalty, they were like a hole and a half ahead of the group behind them.
Right.
And if that's the case, then what are you doing? Like that just doesn't, it's almost like at that point, as the rules official, you're kind of like sticking your foot out just for the sake of sticking your foot out. So, I think there's a lot to it, but at the end of the day, the only way we're going to fix this problem, I'm going to keep saying it, is universal enforcement. Have somebody on every single group with a stopwatch or whatever you want to do, a clock or whatever the case may be. We need it because professional golf has gotten incredibly slow.
Right.
And it sets a bad example for everybody. And when you have situations like this, it allows the credibility of the rules officials to go out the window. Right.
I like that we're penalizing players though, or at least getting somewhere, right?
It's something. It's better than nothing.
If it's not in the right spot, that's okay. We're getting to a point where maybe this becomes a more normal routine on professional golf tours. So then that's a positive at the end of the day too.
Yeah. And then finally, we've got a couple little quick equipment stories to talk about. First, Nelly Korda, who has a full bag Taylormade deal, went back to her old Titleist driver at the Evian. Do we make much of this? We've talked about Taylormade and the Stealth driver a couple times this year. First with Rory McIlroy. We know Colin Morikawa is playing an ancient sim driver at this point. Now we see Nelly, after not being happy with performance, switching back to her old Titleist driver. Despite having a contract. What are your feelings on that?
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the powers that be at TaylorMade respond to that, right? Nelly goes and shoots right around level par those first 2 days, whips out her Titleist driver and shoots 64. Did she shoot 64 because she switched drivers? Probably not. Does it help? For sure. But probably doesn't make a lot of those putts go in after shooting that 64 round. But really interesting to see if she continues to use that Titleist driver. I'm really going to be interested in the next event too that she plays in, if she goes with that or goes back to that TaylorMade bag deal. I think she signed that towards the beginning of the year. So interested to see that. And like I said, how the TaylorMade reps kind of come back from that.
I would assume that they remedy it pretty fast. Like we saw with Rory earlier this year, he criticized his Stealth too pretty openly. And just said they, no matter what they did, they couldn't really get it right. And it's funny because, we've seen a lot of content over the last few months from Team TaylorMade. And I think at some point this winter, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and go a different direction than where they're going right now with the Stealth line. So maybe we're going to see a carbon age. Yeah, maybe it's time to move on from carbon age. The era needs to end. Last topic, and we didn't put it on the script, but just quick thoughts. PGA Tour says they are not going to go along with this proposed ball modification, ball rollback. Do you have any thoughts on that, just in terms of what we know right now?
So we talked a few weeks ago about this and how I made the point that all entities, the PGA Tour, the RNA, the USGA needs to all agree with something. The RNA came with it first, right? They wanted to kind of roll back the golf ball.
Yep.
Do you think the PGA Tour not supporting it, which I think is interesting, I thought it would be the other way around, the PGA not supporting it and saying they won't roll back the golf ball, do you think this effectively kills it for the rest of the governing bodies?
Oh, yeah, I think it's dead. Yeah, I mean, you've got two, in theory, you would have two majors where the rolled back golf ball would be played, but you wouldn't see it played anywhere else on the PGA Tour. And you're not going to get any of these players to voluntarily play it if they know their competitors are playing a longer golf ball, right? Because you're immediately at a competitive disadvantage. I think it kills it. I think it's dead. Right. Now, I wonder, we just got done talking about gear, and I understand that, guys like Tiger and guys like Rory have said there should be a professional golf ball and there should be the golf balls that every other slob on earth can play. But I wonder how much the industry railed against this behind the scenes. Titleist, TaylorMade, Bridgestone. Manufacturers of golf balls make a ton of money off of the idea that The pros are playing this. It's in every single Pro V1 commercial I've seen in the last decade of my life. Play the ball the pros play. Play the number one ball on tour. Well, guess what? If there is a standard golf ball, that's gone. It's completely gone. So nice. I almost wonder if that wasn't more of a factor behind the scenes, almost in the way that we see in America, large corporations lobby behind the scenes, lobby the government to go certain ways on certain things, on certain policies. I kind of feel like a similar situation could have played out here, because who would be most impacted by a unified golf ball that all playing professionals would be forced to play? The manufacturers of golf balls. I don't know.
And what a time for Brian Harman to win the Open Championship, right? You know, a guy that doesn't hit it very far. He's in the bottom half of driving distance on tour and all season. So what a time for a guy that doesn't hit it very far to win. I think they waited till Brian Harman won the major, right? Lapped the field there, and then put out that statement that the PGA Tour does not support the golf ball rollback.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, so that is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. Watch for our full betting lineups on TikTok and YouTube before the Wyndham. Subscribe to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. And of course, if you're out there playing this week or this weekend, you know the drill. Whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.